Hey there everyone, I'm going to start my video right here just to give you a quick glimpse of Flathead Lake. Now, I had a vision back in 2006 that a good friend of mine named Roger brought me to this location right here. And he showed me Flathead Lake, which is right out here. Now, I had previously had a discussion about this. But now I'm going to talk about being at the other end of that experience when I realized I had been here before. I was fooling around over in this area of Bigfork and I found this location kind of by accident, and I started to recall the day that Roger brought me here to show me the lake. Okay, and so in this video I'd like to talk about when it was spring of 2010. I was here within my first year of having moved to Bigfork and kind of wandering around and getting to know the area. And during that time, I realized I'd been here before on more than one occasion, and that when I came up here, I started to remember everything. Okay. Back in 2006, I was training with Guru Brockman, so his name was Roger, and he taught what they call Kuntao Salat and a little bit of this and that. And he had his own little program. He had like 3 categories, you know. I think he had like maybe a regular student, you were like a regular martial artist. Otherwise, you could be like a scholar warrior. You're going to take it to more of a educated level, so you're going to be more well read, okay? But he also had the mystic warrior, and he said, you know, I'm the only one in his program for being a mystic warrior. And so one day I was over to visit Roger, and he said, we're going to take a little field trip. And that's when he asked me to, first of all, go downstairs. He had the basement apartment at his parents'. You'd either train out in the yard or in his apartment. And that time he just wanted me to go down and do 100 breathing meditation breaths. I didn't tell him this, but I went ahead and did 108. And then after I was all done, we hopped in his truck and we took off for Westminster. So he lived in Thornton. We drove over to Westminster to some park off of maybe 92nd Avenue, somewhere out west of I-25. And it had a really tall staircase, so we did some training involving staircases. Like we would put like a long stick over our shoulders and hold buckets of something. I think he had sand or rocks, kind of like how Chinese people do, to get some really good training. And when we got to the top of that staircase, you know, it was pavement. And so he and I were talking, and he said, okay, Jody, I need you to turn around. And when I turned around, I was standing in that place I showed you. Now I wanted to get out of there quickly in case it's bothering anyone. I don't know. I think that's public right there. It's part of the school property, but you know, I just wanted to make that quick and then make the rest of this trip downhill. But now that you've had a quick glimpse of that, it's funny. I was in Westminster one second and in Bigfork the next. We were standing right up there, and he asked me to guess what lake that is. And I thought, well, that's got to be Stanley Lake. So if you were in, you know, the Denver Boulder area, if you're familiar with Stanley Lake, I'm thinking that's the next best possibility to that. And at the same time, I wanted to point out before I hop in my truck that let me see. So we did it like that, but then we hopped in his truck and we went for a drive, and we ended up going over to see where Rosie lived. So then he was telling me that we're in Bigfork, this is where we're going to live someday. And then after we drove around, I think he pulled back over here and parked in a spot, and then he and I actually hiked up this together, and he had me taking staff. Okay, so this is a hardwood staff that Howard made. So it was very interesting. Before we left Roger's house, by the way, he had a couple of other things that he introduced me to. And one of those would be this short stick, and possibly that's like a bokken the wooden version of a katana. So he found all of his driftwood living in Texas, Howard did, and he made those. Now, that's the other thing is, me and Rosie were sitting there in her house one day, and I discovered those in the corner, and she's like, oh, by the way, you know, Howard really wanted you to have those weapons. And she explained them to me, and she gave me a lecture that was a lot like the one Roger gave me. So, you know, like winter of 2010, I'm discovering these weapons, and I'm starting to realize that's funny. So I was putting it all together by, you know, by fooling around up here, you know, in spring of 2010, I started remembering the conversation and remembering Roger bringing me here. But then I realized, you know, what Rosie explained to me about those weapons is the same thing Roger explained to me. Now, I wanted to hop in the truck and share maybe a little bit of music. Let's see here if I can find something appropriate for our ears. Okay. Alright, it's kind of slow going, sorry about that. Alright, we're gonna listen to this track. This is the song that comes to mind. I'm thinking about telling you guys this story. And this is the music I was listening to with my father when I was a little kid back in the Florida Keys, back in, like, you know, 82, 83 when this came out. And one of the times I came from was 1983. And so we were listening to New Order quite a bit. And then later I realized I came here from 2006 and with my friend Roger Brockman who brought me here. So I'm kind of going in a backwards way. Now, I also had a dream that I was here. Before I moved here, I was coming up this road, feeling that I was coming home. For some reason, I was crossing that over with living in the Florida Keys. And it was making me think of coming down past that restaurant, and we get down there and we take a right, but then noticing instead that we had mountains and a school here. And then another part of the dream, we were taking our trash out to the dump here. And in my dream, I got it crossed up with driving out to Rockland Key for some reason. I had a sneak preview of this kind of dreams and visions. Right. Yeah, Roger showed me this on the way over to that parking spot. The house that we've done and painted and all this stuff, but this is... Right? It seems like I've been here before. I realized that Roger brought me here and told me this is where I'm going to be living someday. This is Bigfork. This is your friend Rosie Clearlight's house. He brought me around the other way. Took me over to the high school. We parked and we got out and walked up there. And then he showed me the same place we started out with when we were at that park in Westminster. So it was almost like magic. You know, he said, Jody, let me see. Oh, you know what? I kind of made a mistake here. He said, Jody, I might leave the truck up here. Actually, I was indecisive. I was going to take it here and talk a little bit. Now, I didn't have a vision about the tennis courts, but since we moved here, I spent a lot of time hanging out up here at the tennis courts with a good friend of ours, Ted. And he was like an expert in tennis, and he could make friends with all the bigwigs in the area. Now, I'm going to shut her down, shut the truck down. And before I get out, I wanted to briefly talk about the house I just showed you. I was also trying to keep it moving, you know. And let's see if I can show these pictures or not. So this is Howard and Rosie with their daughter Freya and their granddaughter Garrity. Now, it all started in 1982, like within my first year of moving to the Florida Keys from Port Huron, Michigan. I moved to the Florida Keys. I didn't have very many friends, and shortly after Christmas, I had this vision that my parents took me over to meet Rosie and Howard, who were taking care of a little boy named Billy. They said his name was Bill Lead, and he's going to be a famous rock star known as Bill Lead. Anyways, that's kind of when it all got started. So I did a number of videos talking about those times. So that's where I first heard of Rosie and Howard, and so I always thought those were my mom's friends. And so this is Howard when he was alive over at that same house. And very interestingly, Roger spoke about Howard as if he knew him. Like before we went on that little trip, he started telling me about Roger was telling me a little bit about Howard and that particular staff I showed you, that short staff with the it almost looks like a club. He told me about that, and he mentioned that you know, Howard would go outside and train in the yard quite a bit with his weapons, you know, and I was kind of wondering whatever did happen to his old friend. Whatever did happen to his old friend Howard, you know, and it's kind of funny. I was talking about Howard like he knew him, and so that's where I wanted to show you a quick flash of those weapons. I wanted to get this out again. I got ahead of myself on that, but particularly when Roger explained this particular knot and the symbols it meant, it's very interesting because Rosie gave me that very same explanation. So anyways, we started out over there because that's what really helped start triggering these memories of having time traveled here to Bigfork on more than one occasion. So in 2006, Roger brought me, and when I get down to the other end of town, there's an area there where I started remembering when me and my buddy Will went out and about. We were running around Denver, and I must have did a time slip out there because he was showing me around Bigfork a little bit too. Now, back in 1983, you know, so I first met Billy when he was hanging out with Rosie and Howard. But then later on, my parents really did have these friends named Bill and Stella. And they were living on Sigsbee, which was a Navy base. And we would go to the beach with them and hang out at their house. And a couple times they had Billy with them. And so one of those times, so I'd come over and ask, hey, where's Billy, you know? I kind of got the feel for it. So the most funny thing is, I knew their house, you know, I wandered all over their house, you know. I'm a nosy kid. And so I went upstairs. I think Stella told me, go upstairs. And I went up there, and her upstairs was different. Instead of it being her upstairs, it was the upstairs of the house next door to Rosie's old house. And so one day, I was outside, spinning my chucks. So in spring of 2010, I was getting over, like, I don't know if it was pneumonia or something, but I was getting better. I was out here, right here in this backyard. I was spinning my chucks, listening to my headphones, and I was looking over at this house, and I started to remember this house. And then later on that day, I was visiting my neighbor here, living in this house, and you can't quite see it yet, but there's a bedroom window up there, and I'm kind of thinking she's probably watching me hanging out in the backyard, spinning my chucks. I was out here spinning my chucks, and it looked so beautiful, the sun shining off of the lake and everything. And I just felt like somebody was watching me out of that window. Anyways, so in a vision in 1983, I went up there and I found little Billy. And he was a little bit younger looking. It's funny, when I first met him, he was like 8 going on 9. His hair's growing out, kind of curly in the back. Kind of a mixed blonde kid, you know. And in this vision, he looked like maybe 5, you know, he had straight hair with his bangs cut straight across. I'm like, whoa, Billy, you look so different. I mean, your hair. And he's like, that's not important. I need you to come here and look out this window. You know, I was able to put it all together because in reality, I went to visit my neighbor. I was looking out that window, and it was like that same exact window and that same exact point of view. And I realized in the visionary state, I could see myself out the window spinning my nunchucks and all that stuff. And so it really helped me to recall that instance, okay, where I started to realize I'd been here before. And so, you know, in the vision back in 83, you know, Billy was explaining to me that that's myself in the future. I don't know if he said what year it was, but he said, you know, I'm going to go live in Montana, and then I'm going to be a Shaolin master. I was spinning my nunchucks, And I was listening to a CD Walkman, so we didn't have those yet. I didn't know what a CD was, and he said, explain it to me. And he said, and we had it set up so you could hear the music. So if you could go back and find that video, I pulled through there and explained that whole thing, and I also shared the song. So, or maybe I'm hearing, so a thing they released in 2008, I just can't think of it. Their State of Trance 2008. I think it's CD2 track 8. I can't remember the title, unfortunately. I wanted to share this. So I used to live right over here with Rosie Posey, and at some point start coming down here regularly down these stairs. This is really cool. So I remember Rosie would tell me, "Oh man, you're gonna love it when you get here. You're just, you just walk down to the end of the block, and there's gonna be these stairs that takes you right down in town." She's telling me there's gonna be this little town. So it's going to be easy to find work. And it really was, as long as you get here when the season starts picking up. So, when I first got here, I worked at Dairy Queen, and I lost my job because I got pneumonia really bad. And then, so it seemed like, that's right around the time all this stuff started unfolding for me, was when I got that pneumonia and was recovering. That's why I wondered, back in 2000, I also had a really bad case of the flu around the time. I had some other major time trips and stuff. So in this case, so we're going down Electric Avenue. Now, I remember hanging out at Bill and Stella's, and they would listen to popular music, whatever's latest, and we're listening to "You're Gonna Rock On to Electric Avenue, Gonna Take You Higher." And my sister said something, "Hey Jody, that song's about E Avenue, right?" And I'm like, "Why E Avenue?" She goes, "Cause that's where Billy lives." I always thought my sister knew about Billy. Anyways, I thought that was a funny coincidence that I actually ended up living here on Electric Avenue. And when I left Montana to live in Montana, I felt like, by leaving the Denver area, I'd also be leaving behind my music scene and taking a break from all that stuff, because previously I had sought out Bill Lee because it had all these visions and stuff that are really interesting, and it was very disappointing that I wasn't able to really connect or have a chance to even visit. And then at the same time, it was frustrating because my friends all think I'm going crazy, but not Rosie. I felt like Rosie always understood me, and that's kind of a big thing that brought us together. Not to mention, I started recalling when I met her in the visions of 1982. And so I couldn't wait to get back in touch with her. It took me clear till 2002. I met her in 96. And then I met Rosie in 96, and I think she was only around for about a year or so before she took off to the other side of Colorado. She got back with her old husband, Howard, and they ended up going to Bigfork by 98. I think they were already in this house, but I lost contact with them. It's like, and the funny thing is, I found like a Christmas card or something. I was looking for that to be able to find a way to get her phone number, and that sucker disappeared. I found it right where I thought I should find it. I mean, I went through that photo album so many times and I couldn't find it. 2002, I finally found that thing, and I could call Rosie and we could talk. So I couldn't wait to talk to her again, because I felt like she's one of the only people that are going to get what I'm talking about. At any rate, let me take a little panorama of where we've been. Right? We just came down these stairs. Boo-ba-doo-boo. And really cute old stuff down here. So this is like the center vein of downtown. Then there's like a little side street over here with a little more stuff. So yeah, so that's kind of what brought me here. Is in a roundabout way, you could say Visionary State was a big part of it. I felt like it was time to take a break from Denver. Well, in spring of 2010, man, I don't know what came over me, but I got my little hand drum and I started walking down here, and I walked all the way down to the park. Okay, and so what I did, it also brought back some flashbacks of other things. So like when I very first got here, I must have had a visionary slip, because I went down to this park, and I heard some singing in the bushes, and I just couldn't find the person singing. Well, I was the one that was doing it, so I'm going to show you where I ended up and tell a little bit more about what happened when I got down to that park. But the other thing that happened is I went over to my my bedroom window, and I found this very strange little, I don't know if it was like a can that releases a gas or something. That's kind of what I thought. And it seemed to be stuck to the side of the house with its pointer in my window. And then I went and told Rosie all about it. I said, Rosie, I went outside and I thought I saw this device stuck to the house, and it seemed to have a little, it could have been like the hose or where it sprays out its stuff, you know. And that's something that, you know, that may sound like psychosis, you know, like psychosis where you're like paranoid about, you know, the idea of somebody trying to spray gas in your window, like waiting to know you're in there and then releasing the gas. So that was the idea. But she told me that Howard put that there. He wanted me to see that. And that was kind of eerie because I think I had seen that before when I was about 18 years old. I found one like that under the trailer where I sleep in Key West. So that's kind of eerie. But it must have been a visionary state, because in that, when I came down here that one night, I realized that's where the singing came from. I was the one doing the singing. Well, now, let's talk about, after I lost my job at Dairy Queen, by the way, I took a little break. And then when things were picking up, I got a job down here at this t-shirt shop. So this is kind of after all the stuff that happened. I started normaling out. We had a little coffee shop, ice cream shops. I worked at both shops. And later, I ended up working at this place called Creative Native. So like, I think 2012, I worked there a little bit. And so had some really good times down here. So that doesn't really tie in with my story, but just, you know, a little bit after all this stuff happened, I had worked down here. So I think somewhere in 2010, I started to kind of normal out, and I was coming down here to work, and this was my regular commute. And well, before that, I was coming down to the bar a little bit to eat out and just, I don't know what the fuck I was doing down here, but this is the Garden Bar. It's where I met Ted. So one day I had Rosie pull up here so I could run in and get some food. And I'd seen this guy, Ted, standing there. And I thought I recognized him because, you know, I was kind of confused and had a weird idea that maybe Bill Lieb was around here. And that he was incognito, right? And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how I happened to get put in touch with Bill Lieb, because I had prophesied before coming up here that I'd be put in touch with him. And it created a lot of confusion, you know, because when I thought I was in touch with him, he said something about we're keeping things incognito, right? And so I walk in here and I see this guy, Ted. He looked a little bit like if Bill Lieb had on a wig, but he also had on clothes looked like he was a painter, a drywall worker or something like that. And so I introduced myself to Ted. And after I started hanging out with him, then I started realizing, oh my God, you know, I remembered Ted. I met him in Denver before I came up here. So in 2010, there's a number of things that happened where I started realizing, oh my God, I've been here before. And I thought this would be a good idea to take this hike, just to get some exercise and visit Bigfork again. You know, I haven't done this in a long time. But we're going down to the old bridge. That's the side street. We had just come down the main street. There's your side street. That's where we all used to go hang out. You know, once I got to know Ted and he found a nice girlfriend named Lori, we all used to hang out right over here. And we'd walk down to this bridge, and I would jump off and go swimming, and we'd go sit under the bridge and smoke pot together and stuff like that. So back in 2010, you know, it was all coming together that I had been here before. You know, it was really kind of freaking me out. I was starting to get really confused, and so I'd come out and I would walk around a little bit and try to see if somebody's following me, you know. So I started getting paranoid. I thought, you know, somebody's messing with me again, aren't they? You know, and so that's why, you know, leading up to me moving to Montana, I had been to that Vision Quest, and I was warned that the Indians, you know, the feds kind of keep an eye on the Indians and anyone that goes around them. So I was a little bit paranoid about stuff like that. Like I really hate to buy into stuff like this, but like, you know, black ops and stuff like that will do things to mess with people if they think, you know, they're I don't know what you call it, like activists and stuff like that, you know, or somebody that might help Indians. Nonetheless, I'm not sure if I can get across there because I haven't been down here since they started construction, but they might have. Yeah, the bridge is closed. So anyways, it's very interesting that when I first got here, I think I skipped from June of 2009 to like maybe April or so of 2010. And I came down here and I went to the park across this river, and I was walking around in the bushes on the other side, and I could hear someone singing, and I couldn't find the singer, but in reality I was the one that was doing the singing. And I got down here and I sat down by a big tree. I felt like I was getting a download. Like I felt like it was showing me how the universe works and all this stuff, you know, how time works, all that stuff. So, you know, what it was showing me is how everything's connected in that way. Like I was just sitting over on the other side of that river, and I was getting all this information. I was kind of wondering if maybe, you know, there had been Indians here, and if they had made this like sacred by doing their ceremonies and things. I was getting that vibe, you know. And so after I went through all that, I think that's when I went up here and I introduced myself to Jill of Creative, what is it called, Native and Creative. And I started getting to know her a little bit. And then we made connections with a group called Phoenix Fire, a lady named Valdine had started, that is kind of an eclectic prayer group that honors all paths of life. So no matter what religion or whatever you are, or whether you have one or not, you're always welcome to join us in prayer. So it kind of made a very important connection, because I had that epiphany. I asked her, you know, has there been Indians down here or what, you know? I think there could have been. They could have had a Blackfeet Indian could have been here before. At any rate, that was very interesting, like how I was getting a download of information about how the universe works and how time connects. So that might explain why, you know, I'm having these parallel dimension things, you know, like it's like you can have back and forth, you know, like time moves forward. But then when we make when we get ideas, you know, we put energy in motion and we create likelihoods, and some of those likelihoods may not occur in this reality and only occur in parallel realities. So stuff like that was coming to mind. At any rate, I wanted to go over some of these instances that I had come from. Now, when I was living in Denver back in 2006, so around the same time I had the vision that Roger brought me here, I had a vision. Now, Will was a younger guy that introduced me to Roger, and he was staying with me for a while, and it seemed like he and I were out walking around, and we must have did a time trip, because he showed me that bridge, and where you could go under it, and that's where I used to like to go hang out, under that bridge, you know. So now there's another video about how I was introduced to Ted, and just rather reference to that, because I showed where I was coming from Arizona to Colorado in 2009 after going down for a elders gathering to do with Native American people. Very interesting. So I don't know, like, if that has anything to do with the extra magic. I've always been seeking magic. So last video I did about my life was about me moving here, and how I feel like this is where I really started to see the other end of these time trips, you know. And I was saying, you know, it was kind of cool that the number of that episode was 23. It's the number of magic, because I think, you know, that particular year, my first year here, was especially magical, and I don't think I've had any more like that ever since then. It's really simmered down and all that stuff. So I really wanted to outline some of these events where I don't know particularly what order they occurred in, but what it seems to coincide with is I didn't expect to ever see Bill Lieb ever again. I just figured it's time to put all that behind me and forget about it. And a friend of mine said, Jody, you should go onto Facebook. You never know who might be on there. And I thought he was trying to drop a hint, you know. So I went on there first thing and started looking for Bill Lieb. And I found him, but it might have been a fake website. And that's where he said something about we're keeping things incognito. So when I went in here and saw Ted, I thought he looked like Bill Lieb incognito. And after I started hanging out with Ted, by the way, I started remembering our conversations from when I seen him in Denver. So so that seems to be around the time all this stuff started unfolding. Like I was put in touch with Bill Lieb by his ex-girlfriend, and that's when I realized I had prophesied these twice in 2009, you know, the year before. I prophesied it twice. And that she said that would be put in touch with an old friend of mine. But for some reason, they're trying to mix it up with Ted, you know. I even remember my friend John trying to explain something weird like, you know, Bill Lee's name is really Ted Paulson or something. And now that starts to make me remember an old memory. Now, the funny thing about these visions is how it really challenges your memory. Because I think even before I left Michigan, I think when I was like 5 or 6, we went to a wedding party or something. And somebody mentioned Ted Paulson. I said, how would you like to get married someday? And someday you'll be living in Montana. And mentioned Ted Paulson. It kind of started freaking me out. After I started hanging out with him, like, oh my God. You know, like I knew he was different than Bill Lee, but I was just like, why were they trying to mix him up with me? Well, there could be a few personality traits they have in common, but I think really importantly is meeting Ted could have created a life-changing experience for both Rosie and I, because he gave us the information to find a gold prospectors club, and by joining a gold prospectors club, that's where we met Gary. I never thought Rosie would have a boyfriend ever again. She found a cute little old man about the same age, 2 days apart in age. And that's how we ended up living in Kalispell, where I've been staying. So that's where, you know, it seems to be like that, having that visionary state, I don't know what you call time. It's not just a time slip, but it's everything. It's like you're just in another reality, in a temporary reality, but it's not just a bunch of delusions and stuff. It's stuff that kind of makes sense, you know, kind of like meeting Ted before coming up here. And when I connected with Ted, I hung out with him, and he realized, you know, I'm not really the right person for him and all that stuff. So we just quit hanging out until he got a girlfriend. Then when I brought him up to meet Rosie, he loved Rosie so much. Rosie told me before she died, Ted actually wanted to marry her. So I'm really glad I introduced the two of them. They had a lot of fun together. So I'll talk about that later in my stories about living up here. But, you know, just really importantly that I think is so special that the thing that made me introduce myself to Ted was that I remembered him from somewhere, and I got him mixed up with Bill Lee. That got me to go talk to Ted. And the other thing that helped get me to contact Rosie was that I seen her in the visions a long time ago. And she was taking care of Billy in the visions, but she doesn't really know him. So just really interesting how all this ties together and affects the trajectory of my life. So that's why I'm saying, you know, so in 2006, I'm trying to create a timeline here. So the times that I came from, I'd say 1983, I was living in Key West. I saw myself out of my neighbor's window with our favorite little host, Billy Lieb. He was the one explaining everything to me. And I was allowed to hear music of the future. It's a funny thing, and I can help thinking it sounds a lot like the music my dad listens to, but maybe better, you know, it's newer. And then the other thing, 1983, so I made that connection when I was out there. I was getting over that pneumonia. I was out there and I was making that connection, going up to my neighbors. So let's go in 2006 with Roger, my Kunthouse a lot friends, Roger and Tito. We used to call him, that was his nickname. I called him Will. And so, and then in 2009, after I got here, I had a little time trip where I went to the future, to just the very next spring. And so I think when we were going to the grocery store, that's when I was tripping out. I kept seeing people that I thought I saw the same person before for some reason. Every time I saw these people that seemed familiar, there's just something where I just felt like I was reliving a time loop. And that's when I took that walk down to the park and felt like, oh man, I started to realize so many things. And then I'm trying to think. The other time trip would be like 2009 on the way from Arizona, because we were driving in Woods Bay past Ted's place. Okay, so that's one I talked about in another vision video, where as I was coming from Arizona to Denver in Colorado, we were near Pagosa Springs, and I did a time trip where, like, you know, I'm awake, I'm driving. And, you know, this is why it's interesting, because, you know, it happened without me even noticing until later. But we were a year in the future and south of Bigfork in Woods Bay when my friend Elias pointed out that's where an old friend of yours lives. And so it showed me Ted's place and his Jeep, and that's where I would go down and hang out. So that's what I'm trying to look at. 83, when I was a kid in Florida. 2006, my Kuntao friends. I'm thinking 2009, with Ted, after I got here in June, just a short time trip. And so I think those are the major time trips I took that brought me to this point. And so very interesting and difficult to explain. So this was the best I could do today to really try to outline that event in my life. That kind of like where I didn't even realize it was happening till I got there. So when we go back to the beginning of my story, once I got to the Florida Keys within that first year, that's when I met Rosie and Howard in my visions. There were a number of times where I would meet Billy, and I would say by the age of 13, I'd seen Bill Lieb as an adult a couple different times, 13, 14 years old in that area. But then after that, I would always get all these little reminders about him. I think, about 93, I kind of put it together. Bill Lieb and Billy might be the same person. I started realizing, okay, that's when I first started thinking I could go to visionary state. But, I forgot all about it till after I got to Denver. And then in 98, I would say maybe it was creeping up on me again, but 98, 99, and 2000 was where it really hit heavy. And so a lot of that, I've gone over that in some of my previous videos. And so by 99 into 2000, I did a time trip where I went from the beginning of November to the end of January the following year. So 99 into 2000. And then I was there all the way to June. Then I came back and then I relived it. And that's when it really woke me up to the fact that I was having visionary state experiences. So since then, it didn't seem like I was having them anymore. It almost seemed like it all ceased. But then in 2002, I think before I quit driving cab, I had a little visionary slip where I think I might have seen Bill Lieb as a teenager at one of my customers' house. And then, so in 2006, it came back and hit me with Roger, bringing me here to Bigfork. I don't know how that slipped under my nose. And there were a couple of more times where I was having visionary state in 2009 before I left Colorado, where my friend Janet was telling me this lady named Amelia Bentley is going to put me in touch with an old friend of mine, which is what seems to be, around the time all this stuff was happening. What happened? I came in contact with this woman. I think she created a fake page on Facebook. And when she found me on there, she made friends with me. And she, put me in touch with an old friend of mine. And it seems like around that time, I had had pneumonia. And I had been taking some kind of a medication to deal with my allergies and stuff. So I don't know if that was kind of making me weird. Because I think about in 2000, I was sick around the time I was having that big time leap. But I talked to other people. As I've mentioned before, there are other people I know who have had time trips, like my Kung Fu teacher. I'd finally get back in touch with in 2012, and I told him a little bit about my stuff. And that's when he sent me the story he wrote, because he's had so many time trips, and he's straight and sober. And then Valdine, I mentioned I was put in touch with her since I moved here. She'd have at least 1,000 years worth of vision, straight and sober, professional. Yeah, and so when I look at, why is this stuff happening, it's hard to say if there's anything that correlates, like, being sick or being under duress or anything like that. But at any rate, I had seen Bigfork, Montana, on more than one occasion by coming here in the visionary state, starting with 83, say 2006, and 2009 a couple times. So anyways, I'd like to come back and talk a little bit more about all the different things that were going on at this time and share more about the times I've spent in Montana living with Rosie and all the things that we've talked about and that I've learned from her. At any rate, you guys have a great day. I hope you enjoyed my talk, and I will talk to you soon.